I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I'm the host of this show, and I'm really glad to have you along listening in today, wherever it is that you're listening and whenever it is that you might be listening in. Today's episode is sponsored by my good friend Solomon Moe Whitfield. Solomon Moe has been a longtime supporter of this show and of the 21047.com mission in general. And so just having him along has really helped me reach out farther and wider and spread these stories with more and more people. And so I'm grateful for all of the supporters that I have of this show and of this mission. Mo and others support me through the Patreon platform. You can learn more about Patreon by going to my website, 21047.com, TWOTIM47.com. Scroll down to the bottom and you'll see a link to Patreon where you can go back me financially in this mission and then get some cool perks, including recognition as a show sponsor and some different things along the way that may help you out as you help me out. So I appreciate all of the supporters again. Today's episode, so I followed along Harvey Lewis, who's been on this show, had this 1 week challenge after Thanksgiving where he shared stories, mostly runners who were engaging in a plant-based, vegetarian, vegan sort of lifestyle. One of those folks that he highlighted was Jenny Baker. And the thing that caught me about Jenny's story was she had started a running group at Crossroads Church in Cincinnati. And I'm somewhat familiar with that church because Tracy Outlaw, who's also been on this show, used to talk about Crossroads quite a bit. But Harvey shared through Jenny's story that she had started this running group that ultimately led 1,400 people to participate in the Flying Pig races several years ago. One of the races, either the marathon, 10K, 5K, there's several races. I actually ran that last year, and that really intrigued me. So I reached out to her. She agreed to be on the show. What I didn't know was how many other areas of life Jenny and I would end up digging into. All of them fascinating, all of them full of her wisdom. She absolutely has such a great outlook on life, outlook on being healthy, an outlook on preparing our bodies to do good things. So I can't wait to share this conversation with you. It's one of my longer ones, so I won't spend much time here in the introduction, and we'll get right over there to my conversation with Jenny Baker. Thank you. Well, I want to welcome Jenny Baker to the 21047.com podcast. So welcome, Jenny, and thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited about this.
So I wanted to ask, I ask a lot of folks when we get started in this conversation, how did you get your start running?
That is a fun question to answer because I'm not sure how many people have the same answer as I do. My parents and my in-laws, actually my father-in-law, they got me into running. So my husband Franklin and I met when we were in college at the University of Kentucky. Go Cats. And I played basketball in high school and had kind of continued into college just recreationally, and realized that once I graduated from college, it wasn't very easy to go play a quick pickup game of basketball. That required a lot more than I had at my disposal. And so in my senior year of college, kind of got a little bored and needed something new. And Franklin and I were dating at the time, and Franklin's dad is a wonderful runner, and my parents were running for health at that point. And so Franklin and I said, well, if our parents can do this, how hard can it be? Maybe we should become runners. And that was one of the silliest things that we probably ever said to each other. And so from there, we started running on the road. And I remember 3 miles was a really big deal. I thought that was forever. a forever distance. And I would meet my dad in the mornings, early in the mornings, and we would go running before we would go to work. And so Dad and I would run together, and Franklin, he's always had a natural propensity to run. And so he would run, and we did our first 5K probably back in 2002. It was a January. It was called the Frosty Feet 5K. And, I mean, we got beat by women and small children. Like, it was not a pretty experience, but it was fun. And from there, it just became a rhythm of health for us. And then we kind of started pushing the envelope a little bit more with distances. And I remember running my first half marathon, and I thought I was going to die. And then my dad thought he was going to die. And so we all metaphorically died together at this half marathon. And then it just kind of grew into this crazy, okay, well, what if we went and ran in the woods? Like, we hear people do these crazy trail runs in the woods. Like, that's crazy, right? Well, yeah, but let's go try it anyways. So then we found ourselves on the trails running, and then we heard about these crazy ultra runs in the woods. And so before I even signed up for a marathon, I signed up for this 50K, which is about 32 miles, a 50K in Georgetown, Ohio. And Franklin and I signed up to run this run, and it was terribly amazing. I learned more about myself running that 50K than I think I had in doing some kind of activity like that ever. And so from there, it just became this joy of getting out of my comfort zone and being in a space where I could just listen. I mean, you're in the woods and it's relatively quiet. And so you find yourself in a situation where you have space to feel things that you haven't created space to feel in your normal day. You have space to think about things that you wouldn't normally have the space to think about. And so it has now become this gift in our lives of space and time and quiet. So that was a long answer to your really quick question.
No, but it's a wonderful answer. I was just writing this morning. I'm writing a blog post. I ran my 10th half marathon last weekend, and when I ran my first one.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But when I ran my first one, about 4 years ago, it was just unfathomable to me that there would be a number 10. But, what I was writing is that what I have found is the, rewards of running can't be measured like a lot of people think you would measure them, which is the miles, heart rate, pounds lost. I said, I measure running by relationships. And the first and foremost of that relationship has been my relationship with God. And that has come completely through listening. I was always a big talker to God. I'd tell him what I needed, tell him what I want him to help me with, get me out of this jam. But in terms of listening, that really came through running, and exactly like you just described it. I think you just get in this quiet place. He didn't say be still and listen for no reason at all. So I think, and it's ironic a bit that it was out there when I was probably moving harder and more laborious than I ever have. I mean, running's a very difficult deal for me. But to think that that was the place where I could be still and finally listening is filled with a lot of irony for me. I was reading and so I met you through a series that Harvey Lewis was doing on his Ultra Runner page, and somehow there was a question about running, and you talked about running, connecting your mind and your body. And maybe you answered that a little bit in that previous answer, but I wondered if you'd talk just a little bit more about this whole idea of connecting mind and body.
So in our Western culture, and I'll just speak for our American Western culture, and I alluded to this earlier, we have an inclination to pad and to comfort our lives. I remember being horrified that my parents would give me a car when I was 16 that had no air conditioning in it. I said, Dad, what am I supposed to do without air conditioning? And Dad said, well, roll the windows down. And so the first time it rained, it was terrible because I was extremely uncomfortable in the middle of the summer in this car because I was so accustomed to creating comfort in my life. And because of that, it's almost like we mute this area of our life that is very important to us, and that is our body and our physical health. And so if we believe we're created with a purpose, and we believe that our physical body functions to get us closer to that purpose, then we have to make sure that we're listening to what the body needs, what it's saying, and how it's functioning. And so for me, in college, like when Franklin and I met, he jokes that the only thing I had in my kitchen was the cheese puffs. I would go to Sam's and get those big jugs of like cheese puffs. And I had cheese puffs, and I called them ramen. Some people call them ramen noodles. And so I had the ramen noodles and cheese puffs in my kitchen. And I could eat what I wanted, when I wanted, and still function how I would define as good and well. And then as I started paying more attention to my body and what my body was saying through running, I began to become way more aware of just how important it is to treat this vessel with honor and respect. And so I started paying attention to my energy levels. I started paying attention to my blood work. For the first time, you start, I guess they call that adulting, at least the kids, the millennials call that adulting. As you start looking at your blood work and you go, oh my gosh, now there's this word cholesterol and blood pressure, and I have all of these other things that are being affected, even though, I can go run these miles. I still have to now start paying attention to how my body is operating and functioning. And so for me, my ultimate purpose needs to be supported by a healthy body. And I'm now realizing also that my body is tremendously impacted by my mental life and my emotional life. And so the more I give myself space to also process through those areas of life, the more I realize how my physical body is being affected by those things. So stress, anxiety, fear. Fear is actually a really big one, I believe, that a lot of us experience, but very few of us give the space to in order to be able to process and come to a healthy place with that where it doesn't affect our body. So I was struggling with insomnia. I don't know if you've ever experienced a night or even multiple nights where you weren't sleeping well because you were dreaming or thinking or feeling things that you just weren't processing during the space of the day. And so running allowed me to, one, realize how much more I needed to honor my physical body with what I fueled it with and what I put into it. And two, it also forced me to realize the other areas of life that weren't getting that attention that were hindering the physical output that I had. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting. You bring it to I think a good reflection point that, I think a lot of us, even as we're trying to be healthier, whether it be through exercise, whether it be through eating, whether it be through prayer life, I think so much of the time, the focus for that, the motivation for that is, I want to feel better. I want to have more energy. I want to feel good. But you take it to another step that I think too many times we skip. And that is, well, I want to feel good. I want to have energy. I want to feel my best self so that I can do whatever that next step is. And you referred to it as serving the purpose of however you would define that purpose for your creation, for your body. You've really just described everything as this fuel and motivation to make us more capable of whatever it is we think we're purposed to do. And for me, that's really been the unexpected twist of my running journey is I started doing it to run, and I really started it as a way to honor a friend in our community who had been hit and killed by a drunk driver. So it was really just sort of a tribute run. But then along the way I discovered, and for me it was just God listening, me listening to God, him whispering, this is bigger than running, and it's opened up some doors and created some purposes that go well beyond the running itself. So I appreciate that angle you give us there.
Well, it is, and everybody, there's thousands of books out there about purpose and finding your purpose. And so, there's the ultimate purposes that we're created for. But then there are also daily purposes. So daily, I am purposed to be a mother to 2 children. And I'm purposed to also be an honoring, loving teammate to my husband. And so if I want to be around to be able to do that, and I want to be my best self for that purpose, it requires me to be firing on all cylinders. And physically, it requires, me to be healthy and be around. I can't be a good mother to my kids if I am emotionally and physically unhealthy and can't keep up with them and can't give to them because I don't have anything to give. So if we can find those purposes that we're passionate about, sometimes those help get me out the door and get my running shoes on more than I actually want to go run sometimes. So, on any given day, our motivation for running can be a myriad of things. And sometimes it does just come down to, putting on my big girl pants and saying, no, this is what is required of me today to be able to fulfill my purpose. And so I'm going to be a good steward of the things that have been given to me. And I'm going to go discipline myself to do something that doesn't feel good for the greater purpose down the road.
I love that. I love that a lot. Well, let me take that just to a small side branch, and talking about doing some things that maybe be more unpleasant that you would hope for, because I could really relate when you were talking about the big tub of Cheetos. And the reality is that when it comes to diet, there's a lot of us eating things that we think are more pleasing, more fun to eat, and maybe not as good for us as they could be. And so I ran across you on Harvey's page when Harvey was doing this 7-day challenge after Thanksgiving for folks to go vegetarian and vegan. And so he highlighted you because that is part of your lifestyle. How would you describe your diet?
Franklin and I, over the years, have made a switch to what we like to call plant-based eating. Labels, for me, I tend to stay away from labels. I don't know if it's just my rebellious spirit. Anytime you put a label on me, I might like that label, but just because you put it on, I'm going to rebel against it. Right. So saying things like I'm vegan or vegetarian or this or that is not my identity. So I stay away from those things. We like to eat as real a food, we call it real food, as possible. Real food versus processed fake food. And there are the days where, don't get me wrong, we love a good pizza. We love a cake. I made a great cake for my son's birthday yesterday. So, there should be freedom in everything. We shouldn't be bound or find ourselves in bondage to any certain type of yoke of slavery when it comes to food. And so we have found, though, over the years that we function best and our bodies function best when we are fueling them with plants. When I had Levi 5 years ago now, he kind of similar to, I think, your oldest, you said, he came into the world in a very crazy, dramatic way, full of energy, and I got no sleep. For months, he was up all the time, and I just remember trying to get back to running and feeling so sluggish and feeling so low energy and just not feeling good. So I started examining for us kind of what we were eating, and we had tried to eat on the healthier side I was raised in Texas, so we would most often have a meat, a couple of vegetables, and a dinner roll or potatoes or something on our plate. And I, in general, thought that was the best way to fuel my body. As I started reading and learning and understanding, what I realized is that there is significant information out there available that shows that plant-based diets tend to fuel our physical body better in the long run. And so for me, since one of my purposes is to be around for as long as possible to make as big of an impact as possible, I decided that my main goal would be really quality of life, longevity, not necessarily quick athletic performance or, quick athletic performance, more of the long term down the road. And so I do most of the cooking in our home. And so I just told Franklin, I said, hey, we're not going to eat meat anymore. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I want to try it. I've been reading a lot of research out there, and Franklin is in the medical field, so he is very research-based. So I've learned in our marriage of almost 14 years that if I come to him with, evidence-based articles and information, he will most often listen, and he's a good sport and jump on board. And so he said, okay, let's try it. And so we cut out meat. That's kind of where we started, and then started trying to cut out processed food. And the more that we read and journeyed through this, the more we realized, for us, we think that staying away from animal products, both the dairy and the meat, is the best thing for us and our family. And so both of our kids, Lucy, my 6-year-old, she had 2 years of meat, but now, doesn't. Interestingly, a lot of people will ask me, like, well, what about your kids? When don't your kids want meat? And when they're around other people, do they ask to eat it? And again, it's about freedom for us, freedom and not slavery. And so if Lucy asks to have a piece of meat when we're visiting Grandma and Grandpa's, the answer is sure, you may have a small piece of meat, because for us and for our family, we don't want to be bound by law or rules. And we want to operate in freedom. Now, were Lucy to ask us every day, hey, could I have bacon for breakfast every morning? We would use words like, hey, that doesn't align with our team's food philosophy. And it's helpful to use those words because at some point, even with young children, at some point they'll go, what is a food philosophy? What does that even mean, Mom? And so then you have the opportunity to share, okay, for our team and our family, we believe that the best way to fuel our bodies is by eating plants and whole foods and grains. And so that's how our team operates. Other teams do things differently. Different is not bad. Different is valuable. And so we respect them and we love different, and we're confident and comfortable in our different. So we continue down that road. There are days where it is hard because, when I'm out in between meetings or working or running errands, it is easier just to pull through the drive-thru or Subway and grab something convenient and easy. And that goes back to kind of what we have to do as runners. It goes back to self-control and discipline. And so for me, if one of the outputs of a relationship with God is greater self-control, then I'm able to capture that long-range vision of, no, longevity is my vision and my goal here. So I need to make choices in the moment that, even if they don't feel good, align with that long-term goal. And so then I don't go through the drive-thru.
Yeah.
Instead, we'll keep nuts in my car, things like that. So it is hard, though, to make that conscious shift. And especially, for me, I was 33 when we decided to make that switch of more plant-based eating. And so I had 33 years of habits that had to be shifted to align with where I really wanted to be down the road. And I didn't do it overnight. Franklin, neither of us did it overnight. Yet, whether we kind of like running, we had our 5K goal, and then our 10K goal, and then the half marathon. And then we moved our way up as we started incorporating those new healthy habits and got comfortable with them. So cutting meat out. I remember thinking, well, what am I supposed to eat for protein? This is crazy. And so I had to research and read and learn that compared to some other foods, meat actually has very little protein. So I can replace that protein with lentils or beans. So we started incorporating that, and then getting rid of some of the processed foods, like the granola bars and those quick snacks on the go. Okay, so then how am I going to pack snacks if we need to go somewhere? Okay, well, nuts are really good. Dried fruit is really good. So then we started incorporating more of that. So there was a slow progression, and still is a slow progression as we learn more things and are able to incorporate more things into our diet. But hands down, the research, if you're a research person, the research suggests that a plant-based diet for long term is actually one of the doctors are now calling plant-based diets treatment plans for disease, because it has been found to be extremely effective in preventing disease and actually fighting disease. This is my geeky side will come out now.
Bring it on.
Okay. There's this study, there's a community called the Loma Linda community out in California, and they have more, I think, centenarians, more people over 100 than any other pocket or, any other community. And so they've done all of these studies and looked at them and studied their culture and their eating habits, and they've been doing it for years. And so they have found, and actually one of the really super cool things that they did is, and if you look it up, I think it's called, just look up the Loma Linda Health, I'll get it for you here in a second. It's Adventist Health Study 2. And so these guys, they've been studying, a couple thousand people over the course of years. And the way that they got these people in these studies is they targeted specifically people with diagnosed heart disease, so cardiovascular disease, or diabetes. And so they got these guys into this study, and each of these participants, a doctor had recommended that they have a procedure be done for to treat the blockages in their hearts, treat their diabetes. That was one of the qualifications for getting into the study, was you needed to have some kind of disease that needed to be treated. So over time, what they did was they asked these participants, they said, hey, would you be willing to go to a plant-based diet? And so I think I said a couple thousand, I meant a couple hundred earlier. So out of the 200 participants, I think only 21 were not compliant with the study. And of those 21 people that did not comply with a plant-based diet, 13 of them had episodes that did require the surgical intervention. Out of the remaining participants, which would have been 179, out of the remaining 179 who complied with the plant-based diet, only one of them ended up needing a medical intervention for their heart disease or their diabetes within the 5 to 7 years. And so it's amazing to see when you start reading and hearing about these things, just how effective a plant-based diet is for long-term health and disease prevention and disease fighting. So again, I told you that was my geeky side.
No, well, I mean, I would call myself in a very experimental journey in all of this. It actually started when I read the book, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Finding Ultra by Rich Roll. And
he's one of my favorites.
But the piece that really struck me hardest in that was this diet journey that he was on. And most of the time you think, especially of athletes, that you think they start eating a different way to perform better. Well, the piece that struck me out about his diet journey was, he talked about experimenting with being a vegetarian. And I had actually, around the time I read this, experimented with it. And one of the things he pointed out with being a vegetarian is it's very easy to eat as unhealthy as a vegetarian that is as a non-vegetarian. Yes. And so he said he tried the vegetarian and really didn't feel this, remarkable shift in energy or just feeling good that a lot of people describe. His wife was very much plant-based. And so he decided, okay, well, I'm going to try this. All of this was spurred on by longevity. He walked upstairs one night to tell his kids goodnight and could barely make it up the stairs because he was having a hard time breathing. And so that triggered all of this. So then he went to this plant-based, and he said he'd been doing this plant-based for a couple of weeks when he just had so much energy that he couldn't sit still. So he had to get out and start running and biking.
Yes.
And then shortly after, the guy goes out and runs 5 Ironmans in 6 days over in Hawaii. So I'm like, how do you, so I had to at least consider that this diet was a large part of his, just to make that decision, I want to go do that. Has to be spurred on by something. And then about the same time, I interviewed Harvey, and we all know where Harvey Lewis stands on fuel and food. And so I've kind of been trying to pull things out of my diet meat-wise. But I did just recently. So I told somebody I'm training for a marathon in Houston in January. And so the weekend after Thanksgiving. So the couple of weeks, that whole holiday mode kicked in. And so for a couple of weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I ate as awful as you can eat. I mean, I ate like I have for most of the 50 years of my life, 53 years. And so I went out to run. I had an 18-mile run on my schedule for the Friday after Thanksgiving. And I went out, and by mile 14, I was texting my wife, come get me. I just can't finish this. I feel awful. I don't have it in me.
Yeah.
After that, because I had experimented with, just trying to eat more vegetarian, more plant-based, healthier. And so I said, okay. And it was about the same time Harvey had started this series with all of you and had started this challenge. So I said, okay, just for this week, I'm going to get back on this wagon. And so I really, not just vegetarian, but I really tried to eat mostly fruits, vegetables, whole, real foods, as you called them. And then the next weekend went out, and just as part of training around the town here, I ran a half marathon and probably felt as good in that half marathon as I've ever felt running one. And so to me, there's just,
That's awesome.
the research is good, but if you do it, I don't know, there's just no arguing how much better you feel about it. And Rich Rule really went into myth busting the whole idea that meat's the only place you can get protein, and really went even deeper into how much we've kind of been maybe fooled about how much protein we actually even need. Yeah. So anyways, it's fascinating. Your body can only absorb and digest so much protein, and then the rest, it's kind of like vitamins, when we over vitamin ourselves, you just pee it out. And so it's kind of like, you're eating money and you're peeing money out if you're taking a huge supplement of vitamins, because your body can only absorb so much. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Jenny, you've added one more. There's a lot of runners who listen to this who are not plant-based or not vegetarian. So between all of you, we'll just keep poking away at people, putting that pressure on. But I do like, the way you put that it's not healthy to be held slave to anything really, including a diet. But I think through your own discovery, you've just come to this place where it fits into, like you said, equipping your body to serve your purpose in the best way that you feel that you're allowing yourself to do. So, that's what I liked about Harvey's challenge, was it was just kind of 1 week, dive into this and see for yourself. If people are like me,
just try it.
You notice the diff. The next thing I wanted to ask about, and you and I, had this conversation, and a lot of this podcast is that I have discovered in my running journey that there are a lot of parallels between getting good at the running journey and then over here, to the degree you count it different, this life journey. And more importantly for me, I really can draw some parallels between my running journey and my faith journey. 2:10:47 comes from...
I love that you do that. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I wore... On my first marathon, I wore the scripture, 2 Timothy 4:7 on my back. And I fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. But what I really dug into after that was this idea that Paul in the Bible uses so many athletic metaphors when he is out there sharing his story, and more specifically, running metaphors. And So I was fascinated when I was reading that when you were at Crossroads Church in Cincinnati, you actually started a running group there. And I'm going to read a little bit, if you don't mind. You shared something with me. I love what you wrote here. You said, our running group in Cincinnati was born out of my personal story with health. I realized and challenged our community to realize that if we wanted to do big things for God's kingdom, it required a level of physical health. If we're tired and sick, then we're not at our best, and our influence will be greatly reduced while we're here on this earth. If we want to have a long-term kingdom vision, then it requires us to have the physical and spiritual ability to persevere. So I invited everyone at the end to train for the Cincinnati Flying Pig Marathon, or half, 10K, or 5K. And so in the end, we had 1,400 people who trained through the ugly winter of 2014. I just found that, one, the number, the magnitude of it all. I'd love to hear how that all started and sort of that journey, as much as you can tell me.
Yeah, let me tell you how we got to that place, that cold winter in Cincinnati. And I think it's how a lot of us get to places in our lives of influence. I got there in an unexpected way through probably some of my darkest years in my life. My journey with health has been really volatile. So I struggled in college, started in high school into college with unhealthy eating habits. And remember the whole label thing, I don't like labels. So my unhealthy eating habits were obsessive exercising and starvation. And so I was so deceived and confused about truth, about a woman's body and how it should function and what it should look like. And there are a lot of messages out there that helped plant those lies and that deception in me. And so I played the comparison game so often between myself and others, and made very unhealthy choices and had to journey through finding freedom from those lies and finding freedom in truth about what my body was created to do and what a gift it was, and how important it is to be in a place of openness in every area. So my eating was really a secret, private area of my life. I didn't give access to anyone. It was, a dark place. So God wasn't invited into that area. My friends weren't. My family sure wasn't. And I had to find freedom from the lies that I kept dark that kept me in bondage. And bondage can be kind of this weird word. It kept me captive. And when I say captive, I mean, I was mentally and emotionally consumed by negative thoughts about my body. I was emotionally and physically consumed with moving towards this unhealthy purpose for my body. And it took away energy, and it took away emotional space that I had to be giving to more purposeful things and bigger things. And so I learned kind of the hard way about the need to open up every area of my life to scrutiny. And for me, I choose to be scrutinized by God. And so I had to learn to open that area up and invite God into that space and invite other friends in healthy community into that space so that I could find freedom from that. And so I had worked hard to do that and was on staff at Crossroads years later and started realizing that there are a lot of us who are held captive to unhealthy thought patterns and unhealthy eating patterns. And one of the things that I love about the Crossroads community is that they are so visionary and big picture minded, and they move so fast and so hard towards a goal. And I love that about them, and I'm so thankful to have been part of that team for the season that I was. But I realized that our team couldn't keep up with the pace that we were running, towards these big goals of changing the city, eradicating poverty in Cincinnati, helping children learn to read and write and excel in school. And there were some big visions that we had, but our team was not going to be able to keep up if we physically didn't get into a healthier place. And so I went to leadership, and they listened and agreed wholeheartedly. And so they asked me to just kind of talk one day in our staff meeting. And one of the things that I have realized is I want to always start from my story, because I didn't get to where I am just in health, overnight, which I've said several times. It has been this really hard, painful process. And so I always want to invite people into those places, even though sometimes I struggle with shame and embarrassment. I have to remember that there's no shame and there's no condemnation for me, because I believe God through Jesus has forgiven those things. And so, and I believe that he can use those things to help other people. And so I really had to get honest with the staff and share my story and say, hey, look, I did some really unhealthy things for a really long time, and this is where it landed me. And I realized that I wanted freedom from that. So this is how I got there. And now I'd like to invite all of us to maybe move a little bit closer to health so that we can be around for this long-term 30-year vision. And it was probably, I ugly cried in front of our staff. Like, it was one of those really raw moments where you're like, oh, this is going down. I can't believe I'm saying this stuff, but this is going down.
Right.
And yet it was one of the most freeing moments for me to be able to say, no, this story is not mine. This is actually God's story. And I believe he can use this to help transform a community. And so from that, they said, hey, you got to share this with the whole community. Let me tell you, that was really hard. Because it wasn't just, the community wasn't just 100 people. At that time, the community was around 25,000 people. We had multiple, services, and it was going to be recorded and put on the internet. And so it was like the pucker factor was really big on this one.
Right.
But again, I had to go back to what's my purpose? What do I believe my purpose is? Because I want to make decisions out of what I believe my purpose is. And so the decision then is that I am going to share my story. It is God's story. He can use it however he wants. Okay, I'm going to share it. And at the end, we did. We said, hey, if any of you guys want to come run and train for this awesome citywide flying pig event, do it. And I'm not kidding. I thought if we had 200 people, we'd be great. I thought that would be a huge thing. I was blown away when 1,400 people raised their hands and said, yes, we want to do this too. And it was such a humbling, beautiful experience. And I made friends that, are now lifetime friends because we are in this journey together of keeping ourselves spiritually, emotionally, and physically healthy so that anytime God needs us to move and go do something with purpose, we're able to do it.
I'm sure that out of that 1,400, there were just story after story of personal testimony of people who just felt renewed in a lot of different ways.
I think there were. And the beautiful thing was, not all 1,400 trained for this marathon.
Right.
I mean, we had people who, trained for the Flying Pig 5K. I think it's important for all of us to remember. And I don't know, it might sound cliche and like a broken record, but it wasn't running that race that was so impactful for all of us. It was the training that became influential and transformative. So the transformative part about running is that we are exercising our self-discipline muscles. And, there is the Bible talks a lot about suffering. Yeah. And it talks a lot about persevering. You know, you mentioned that earlier about Paul's writing. And because we are a comfort culture, we don't get the opportunity to exercise those muscles very often. And the correlation, I mean, think about, so for those listening who aren't familiar with this guy Paul that we talk about. So Paul was he was Jewish, and he followed Jesus, even though he actually had tried to kill Jesus and been part of all of that. He ended up following Jesus, and he ended up dying and suffering because of his relationship with Jesus and his belief in Jesus. And so this is a guy who wrote a bunch of amazing things that talk about suffering and persevering, and he wrote them oftentimes from jail, right, where he had been he had been beaten and persecuted. And so, when we read Paul's writings about suffering, like, he is a legit authority on suffering, because he suffered well. And, he talks about fighting the good fight. He talks about, run your race with perseverance. Yeah. And we discount because we are in such a comfortable culture. And I am so thankful that we are in a comfortable culture where we can go run and not worry about getting blown up. We can go run and not worry about, an IED, stepping on an IED. We are so fortunate that we have the physical safety and freedom to run. And as we do that, we're able to discipline ourselves so that when we do suffer through a loss, a casualty, relationally, just in the brokenness of the world, when we do suffer, we have practice in disciplining what feels good, or what some people call the flesh. We have had practice in disciplining ourselves to not give into what feels good. Rather, we are motivated and driven by what we know to be truth and to be our long-term purpose. So that the journey of running and training for that was where the gold was. And the finish line was just kind of the cherry on the top, as we all ran our race and finished. That was just a sweet affirmation of the hard work that we had all put in.
Yeah, that is perfect, and so true about Paul. I've kept up another blog for years. It's called A Life of Gratitude, and really it stems from Paul being in prison in Philippians and saying and announcing, "I have found the secret to contentment." And it is so, because of what you have spoke about several times in here, it is really counterculture. I mean, we are all, I think, looking for contentment, but so much of that we're looking for it in luxury, nicer houses, nicer things, being around people we're most comfortable with. We look for contentment in all of these comfortable settings. And so for Paul to say, hey, you all, and I hear him saying it, hey, you're all looking for this comfort and contentment, and I see him waving his hand, say, come, I got the secret, I've got the answer for you. And he's in prison, where he makes this discovery. It's so countercultural. And of course he goes on to say, it doesn't matter what I have, whether I have a little, whether I have a lot. None of that really matters, because my contentment is based on Christ getting me through and above and beyond all of these things. In our running journeys, like you have said, I think it's in that training where we often experience distress and hardship and struggle. I always think about Paul saying, hey, the secret of contentment is right in this struggle. Where are you going to lean to? Pull yourself through it. And I think that finish line is just this trusting, like you said, the icing on the cake, the beauty at the end of the journey. And that sort of is my faith journey. A lot of days, I think as Christians, a lot of time we don't do a lot of favors to the world, because we kind of sell this thing take Jesus and everything gets good, when a lot of times it's take on Jesus and everything gets hard. The deal is trusting that at the finish line there is this beautiful finish, and when you can lean your faith in that direction, so much of the struggle then leads to a lot more contentment than we already have. So I love that you shared that. I love what you did at Crossroads. We attend a fairly big church, and all of a sudden you've got my wheels turning. Just I could literally take what you just said, that beautiful testimony, and take it over to a leadership team and just hit play, because it's absolutely what I think a church leadership team needs to hear in terms of the benefits of a running group like that. So, and I love to know that.
Well, you share. Don't push play. You push play on your story, and you share your story.
Absolutely.
See what happens.
Absolutely. No, I won't push play with yours, but it is the perfect sort of, because we all have those stories. We all have them. So I love it. I love it.
Well, and I love that you use the word contentment. My latest endeavor, actually it's not latest, it's been like the past 2-3 years. My most recent adventure has been publishing a book, and it's for women, and it's in line with my health journey, but it's specifically for mothers, and it's the war on normal, how to find contentment in your post-baby body. And when my co-author Sarah and I were thinking about what word we wanted to use, it was contentment. You know, we don't want to find happiness with our bodies, because happiness is an emotion and it's fickle and comes and goes like the wind. And, you know, we didn't want to use the word acceptance or tolerance, but the real word is contentment, that no matter where we are in this journey, you know, there is peace to be had with where we are. So I love the word contentment.
Yeah, and you kind of jumped ahead, and so this war on normal, you're not a big fan of the word normal.
I think you've probably learned a lot about me in this conversation. I don't like labels. I don't like comparisons. So for me, especially as a woman, and I would say everybody, you know, we all go to the doctor. Not we all. Okay, let me rephrase. So when you have a kid, you take your new baby to the doctor, and you start hearing things like, they're in the 60th percentile. They're about normal. This is average. And so your life as a parent can become consumed with averages and this idea of normal. And so when anything deviates outside of this realm that somebody else defines as normal, you know, we freak out. And we do this in every area of our life. It is a natural tendency, I think, that our culture has created in us. And so one of the things I have found that is very unhelpful as a woman, especially postpartum, and just in general with body image, is this idea of normal. And we all have it. You know, if you ask a young girl, my daughter is 6, and one day, you know, I said to her, hey buddy, what is beautiful? Like, describe beautiful. And she said, blonde hair, lipstick, earrings,
wow,
a beautiful dress. Now, you have to keep in mind, I have dark hair. Don't often wear earrings, and I very seldom wear dresses. And yet this is the definition that my daughter has of beautiful. And she picks it up from media, whether it's print media, whether it's TV. And so there are these messages that we get even in these very young ages. And if we're not being intentional about combating these messages and defining these words differently, then other people will define for us and our kids what should be normal. And just recently, let's take the past 2 weeks of TV. if you're a woman and you've watched the past 2 weeks of TV, you would think that normal is these very tall, very lean and thin women who wear lingerie, walking around and being valued and celebrated for the way their bodies look in this lingerie. And I say that because the Victoria's Secret runway show, happened, I think, in the past 2 weeks. You see that, and then you see it reinforced. You go to the grocery store. You see these magazines at checkout. And you see all these pictures plastered all over these magazines. And then you go to social media, and you see, even if it's a story about how lean the models were, you still see these pictures, and you still see that these women were celebrated and given fame and fortune based on this look. And there is a part of you that sighs and then resigns itself to, that's not me. I'm not normal. If this is normal and there are women that look like this, I am not normal. Therefore, I'm inadequate. I'm not valuable. I'm not good enough. And we've got to stop that. We've got to stop. And we can change media based on our consumer habits and how we spend our money and things like that. But that's like the Titanic. That's like changing directions in the Titanic. It is a long, slow burn and very difficult to get there. What is more helpful, I have found in my daily life, is redefining it for me and being intentional about taking every thought captive that isn't in line with how I believe my body is to look and function. So that was kind of the purpose of the book, was to give women freedom to throw out how they have defined things like beautiful, strong, capable. Throw those definitions out the window and define for themselves those words, and then move closer towards contentment in their bodies. Even if that's, we give this scale of 1 to 10. 10 is you're absolutely at peace with how your body looks and functions, and it's never a thought. Where 1 is, I'm constantly consumed with feelings of inadequacy, disgust. I don't like how it looks or how it functions. And so even if growth and movement, you're moving from a 1 to a 2 as you journey through this, that's growth and that's progress, and that's to be celebrated. So the book really is about helping women redefine and then move closer towards that place of peace and contentment. And I'll tell you what, the book took us 3 years to write because we had to unpack all these things in our lives, and we had to process through all of these things. If we're going to ask women to do it themselves, we really had to make sure we put the muscle and the effort into personally doing it, so that we were coming from a place of humility and also empathy. So it's been a joy to, and it's funny, I don't know that I've ever verbalized this, but my story that was once so dark and shameful is now actually a joy to share because of the freedom I now experience versus the bondage that I was experiencing. And it's a joy to share because I want that for other women and other people. I want that for my friends and my family. I want that ability to be free of anything that enslaves us to things that are opposite of what I think God wants for us. Joy and peace and love and kindness and all of those things that God gives us. We can't experience those if we're in bondage. So I want my friends and family and other women to have freedom, to find contentment, and let that drive them rather than, the opposite, the lies and the deception.
Wow. Yeah, well, I'm not a woman, but I think I may have to get this book and read it. But it is I mean, and obviously that is an issue that is so powerful in women's lives and driven with large force by cultural perceptions and expectations. But, I think, I just think about running again, the running journey. I know when I started, there was so much, and I'm fairly competitive, and so there was a lot of my joy was coming from, okay, well, what is a normal pace here? And what do I look like in my running compared to these other runners? And I don't have a runner's build, I'm 5'9", 220, so I'm just not your lean, normal runner body. So I'd look at the normal runner body and suddenly not feel as good about my running journey. But getting rid of that whole idea of comparing myself to others, to normal, to expectations, really was the shift that allowed me to start feeling more content in my own running journey. And I belong to this group of runners online that came together as part of this tribute to Meg. And, that's the beauty of that group, is they really focus on each individual. There is no grand expectation, no grand goal. It's just helping each person find that, and I love what you said, this joy and peace in their own journey. And I think, it goes back to Paul. I think that whole idea of contentment, he found it in finding this joy and peace in prison, for crying out loud. So I think that opens up a lot of possibilities for us all. I can't wait to share, this message. You've just been awesome. But I think there's a lot of women who need to read your book. So I can't wait to share that, Jenny.
But, to what you're saying about running, I think that was also one of the beautiful things about our running group in Cincinnati. And even, I have since moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and even my close running community here. There is power in finding that healthy community. And as you move down the road towards understanding your purpose and making decisions in line with your purpose and dying to yourself, there is power in doing those things together. I would, were it not for my most important teammate here on earth, Franklin, my husband, were it not for Franklin, I don't know where I would be in my health journey. He challenges me in areas where he knows I need challenging. He encourages me when I need encouragement. He helps get behind the educating part. He reads things and sends them to me, and so we're both pursuing this stuff together. And then with my friends, there is something about whenever you have planned to run by yourself, it's a lot easier to cancel on yourself than it is to cancel on, people you're meeting. And so in Cincinnati, for me, the rhythm I had to adhere to is I had to run at 5:30 in the morning. And I knew that there was no way I was going to drag my tired mama rear end out of bed that early to run if I didn't have some accountability. And so we had this running group where we would meet that early in the morning, and I had friends who I knew were counting on me to be there because they were counting on me to hold them accountable and to encourage them in their journey like I was, counting on them to do for me. And so I have learned for me that I am the most successful at pursuing my purpose whenever I surround myself with other people who are moving the same direction I'm moving at a relatively same growth speed. And those early morning runs, I wouldn't trade those for anything, because those guys, we were in the trenches together, and we conquered together, and we accomplished together. And what a gift that community was and still is in my life. So for everyone, I would say, find your people, find your community, find your tribe, find the people who you can call and say, hey, you know what, I have this run that I really need to go do for my training, and I'm just not feeling it today. Will you meet me, and will you run with me, find those people, because they are invaluable. They are invaluable assets in progressing towards our purpose, in your, our individual purposes and our collective purpose.
Absolutely. Well, that I think is going to be a great place to wrap it up. I know you're busy, but part of this journey I'm on is really creating community. And I am so grateful for your time today. I'm grateful to add you to my community. I think you've just in this short conversation have added so much to what I'm trying to do. And I'm grateful that we've got this connection to be able to kind of lean on thoughts and stuff going forward. So thank you for your time.
Well, yeah. I mean, keep fighting this good fight. Like, you're leveraging the resources that you have to better yourself and to better the community. And so congratulations and kudos to you for stepping out and taking a risk in faith to do something bold and big like this. And I pray that it continues on and continues to be a powerful and positive influence in people's lives. Well,
thank you. Well, you've certainly helped that today. And so I wish you the best. Have a good day. And thank you so much again. Have a good day.
You too.
Well, I hope that conversation brought as much value as it did me having that conversation with Jenny. Like I said, I went into really wanting to talk about this running group that she formed at Crossroads Church there in Cincinnati, and that just ended up being one of many things that really touched me as we had that conversation. She is full of fire, full of life. Certainly, I don't know, I think she lives life in a pretty healthy way, and I mean that not just because of the plant-based diet, but she has a fairly healthy outlook on life. And it sounds to me like it's making some real differences in her family. And I think it's got the opportunity to make some real differences in all of us. So I hope you'll consider going out and giving her book a read. Like I said, it's clearly targeting women, but I may just have to pick that up and read it myself, because some of the concepts she talked about, getting away from this idea of striving for a culturally defined idea of normal, really crosses over into so many other areas of life, running included, like I talked about in the show. Too many times we compare ourselves against this idea of normal that really isn't even a good representation of normal. So I think I may have to pick that one up. I'll just hide it if I'm reading it out in public so nobody can see the cover and understand this is clearly targeting women. Thank you all for coming along and listening in today. As always, if you have any comments, you can go to my website. There's some contact information, how you can reach out to me, share any thoughts, questions, comments that you may have about this particular episode, or suggest any upcoming episodes that you would like to hear. Again, that website is 2tim47.com, TWOTIM47.com. Thank you again for listening in today, being a part of this conversation. Go out there this week. If you're running, have some great runs. If you're not, cheer somebody on. That's always really helpful to folks who are out there running. Just having somebody get behind them, cheer them on. And if you're not a runner and this whole running thing is really foreign to you, I guess I'm just really glad you picked this show to come listen in today. Like I said, I think it had value that transcends running in itself. And I think probably you picked up some healthy life guidance outside of running. So please come back. Until next time, again, my name is Keith Cartwright, 2tim47.com. You all have a great week.